Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. My name is Rich Bowers, and this is our first episode of our Micro Bytes podcast. What this is designed for is really a shorter version of our corporate Bytes conversations. This one hits on specific topics or popular items in the industry, and we do a little bit of a shorter chat, a little more digestible that y'all can listen to and still be on top of everything. And to kick off this initial conversation, I actually have Matthew Truelove with us. He is our manager of the training over at Kainisha. Good morning for us, Matt. How you doing?
Hey, Rich. Yeah, good morning. I'm doing well. Thanks for having me.
Well, thanks for being here. And what are we going to be talking about today? I know it's super popular on everybody's mind. What are we diving into today?
So super popular on everyone's mind here in the first part of 2023. I think it's generative AI related, right? Maybe some GitHub Copilot.
That sounds like a blast. Yeah, I mean, what else is on everybody's mind right now, right? So GitHub Copilot. Um, Want to start there? What is GitHub Copilot? Like, how would you explain it? And maybe even start with for those who may be listening who aren't as technical, maybe start with GitHub and then go into Copilot.
Yeah, absolutely. So GitHub, right? GitHub is online or remote repository for Git. Git, Git, is source control, version control of your code, right? And then, so GitHub being a remote repository, it means that, Rich, you can write some code and then you can control its versions, right? You update it and then you send it to GitHub. And then I can read that code from GitHub or pull it and we can collaborate and do some collaborative coding together, right? Well, Microsoft acquired GitHub back in 2018 for a few $billion, and seems to be a pretty smart decision because we now have GitHub Copilot, and it's GitHub Copilot X. GitHub Copilot X. And the X stands for all of the things that Copilot can do as generative AI, right? So it's like Chat GPT, but for developers in engineering software specifically.
Cool. So that makes it pretty clear, right? Because most of us have now used ChatGPT and seen really the wonders of it, so to speak. So all right. So GitHub, this is Copilot X. And when I was diving into this, I don't know if you saw these surveys, but GitHub kind of created a survey and talked to developers or asked developers a handful of questions. And I think it's really a good part to continue and chat with that piece. So 60 to 75% of users feel more fulfilled when using Copilot and less frustrated with coding. Right. And then another one that I thought was good for us to catapult off of is 87% feel they are preserving mental efforts and burnout by eliminating or cutting down on repetitive tasks. So I know, Matt, you've actually had a chance to dabble in Copilot. You think those surveys are accurate from your experience?
Yeah, I could see those numbers. I think it's a little early for some things, but I can definitely see the advantages in my own dabbling with Copilot and research on some of the advanced features. There's some really cool things that it can help you do. For example, I work in Java a lot, and Java has a little bit of an infamous reputation about being a very verbose language. There's a lot of setup code essentially to write just to get to the main thing that you're trying to do. And Copilot is a step beyond like your IDE autocomplete. It can do, like this morning I had it, hey, can you make a copy constructor for me of a particular class that I had made? And you write it in the comments, it accepts it, and it generated the code in like 30 seconds for me.
So pretty impressive, right? Or is 30 seconds too long? I know you and I were kind of chatting a little bit about this before here. How is that the turnaround time?
Yeah, the turnaround time, I think it does well for simple tasks that I just mentioned. So the 30 seconds, I might have said a little bit too high or exaggerated. It probably could have been like 10 to 15, if that.
Yeah, which is an
And
eternity, right? In IT.
but the scope of the code that I was working with, I was okay with that. I did ask it to do some more complicated tasks, such as persisting something from my Java application to the database and helping me with that logic. That one, I kind of waited for 2, 5, 10 minutes, didn't get anything back. So it's still in its infancy on some things.
Okay, and it's learning, right? And in the back end, it's using machine learning. Is that correct? So there's a little bit of machine learning goes on there, and does it have the capability to start learning the user and things that you may work on or frequently work on?
That's a good question. That's a feature that I'm going to go ahead and say no, not at this early stage and necessarily learning the user, right? But I could definitely see that as a direction they're going. It is backed by GPT-3 or GPT-4, which is the same language model technology that does power Chat GPT.
Okay, and so it's probably more so maybe not at the micro individual level, but I'm sure the machine learning is learning what's most popular then, right? And can kind of predict all of that. So let's dive in more because this is really impressive. I know when I've talked with other developers and trainers and in this space, a lot of times they say, "Hey, keep an eye on Copilot, Copilot X." And so, how about some of the other features? I guess there's also Copilot Labs. But what are some other benefits that you see to this for, let's just say, developers?
Totally. So yeah, again, the reason it's X in their naming convention here is that X is the variable for all of the different things that Copilot can do for you, right? So you've got the idea of code completion. You can use plain language in your prompts. If I'm in a particular Python file, Java file, and say like, hey, I'm trying to extract certain words from this text input, right? Then it'll actually write that code for you. So that's one of the features. One of the other cool features that I really like is the documentation too. So I can also say, Copilot, can you show me the documentation about a particular library method in Java or in Python, whatever platform I'm working on? Can you show me some examples from the documentation on how this is meant to be used in my code? And so there, with it auto completing some simple code for me, as well as directly taking me to documentation, but also giving me, it's formulating responses from the documentation too. So I don't necessarily just have to, it's not a Google search, right? And then me finding the answer there. That speeds up my production time greatly.
And that's incredibly impressive. And they have a lot of these, right? I think that was under the brushes extension or whatever it may be. But being able to jump to that saves so much time, and then it can tell you ideally how to work through that. And so, GitHub is calling this the AI powered code assistant. And there's other features. I think like is it explain and language as well. And I think explain, you're able to highlight the code and it can give an example of what that code output will do. Is that correct?
No, totally. Yeah. It'll give an example. If I'm making an application to produce JSON, for example, like we do in APIs, it can also look at my code and let me know what that format's going to look like as well.
Very cool. And you also mentioned, obviously, you focus on Java, though others, of course. I guess they have a language feature that can translate and convert code languages. I mean, that's got to be pretty impressive, right?
Oh yeah, that's huge, and we're at the tip of the iceberg here for some of the things they can do as well. I also want to mention um, some of the things that in that satisfaction survey you talked about, right? I They can create unit tests. Unit test can take a lot of time, especially when you got a large application with all these different controller endpoints and logical endpoints, persistence methods that you got to go in and write testing for to get a certain amount of coverage. Copilot can generate a lot of that for us as well. So that's a huge feature. And then the other one was also pull request.
Yeah, do you want, so I know I heard about the auto testing and the suggestive test, which is amazing. Do you want to dive into the pull request too? I know from everything that I've seen, this is something that people were getting hyped up about as well.
Totally. So it's kind of a nice place to wrap up some of the major features of Copilot here. Pull requests are a feature of GitHub, right? So it makes sense that GitHub has an automated feature with Copilot for this. When developers are working together, right, when they go through different sprints or whatever methodology they're working under, we get together for a code review, right? Make sure that code is in line with the functionality that we're looking for. Senior developers might review it, and they do that through a pull request, right? So I'm basically trying to submit the code that I wrote into the environment. Well, that can be sometimes a cumbersome, complicated process. There's some ambiguous lines of code, merge conflicts, we call them, some other areas that might be off. So with the Copilot pull request features, one of the things it does is it actually writes a summary of your request so that the developers don't have to do that. They can focus on their code. I can say, hey, I wrote a feature to pull an image from a cloud source and send it to a user in this particular submission. And the summary of that submission, which is going to be read by your approving manager, is generated by Copilot for you.
I mean, that's incredible. And you know, when we start thinking, before actually we even think about the future of this impact on developers day to day, right? There was another feature that I thought was incredible. Now again, not as technical as you are by any stretch of the imagination, but the voice activated Copilot. Did you get to, I don't know if that's been released to everybody yet, but did you get to check that out?
I have not checked out voice activated Copilot. However, I can see some immediate integrations.
Yeah, yeah, the couple demos that I've seen where you could just speak and it can type for you. It can pull information, obviously using that the open AI technology there, and then even turn it into graphs just by your voice. So if you really are one of those people that eat, sleep, and breathe coding, you do it while you're just walking around talking, right? Driving, whatever it may be. Obviously, eyes on the road, please, while you're doing it, but that's the beauty of voice. So that's something I'm keeping my eye on, and a lot of benefits for different groups of individuals as well. So wrapping up here, right? This is our short version of these chats, though. Matt, I could spend a whole day with you talking about this stuff. How is this going to impact developers? Where do you see it coming? How do maybe current developers have to adapt? What are your thoughts on that?
Totally. So there's several different generative AI platforms out there, right? We're obviously focusing on Copilot for the sake of this conversation. I just want to point out that ChatGPT, for example, you can give prompts to help you write code as well, right? But Copilot is specifically tailored for developers with some more advanced features, right? And quicker products produced by their prompts. The way that I think a lot of folks in the industry are looking at this is a productivity tool and augmentation feature for developers to focus on business logic, reduce the amount of time they have to do on boilerplate code or infrastructure setup, as well as get testing done efficiently and quickly, right? So just a feature to help productivity, focus on the more complicated things, and easily convert things between languages and all the other things we talked about.
Great. So just putting a bow on that, not something that will replace developers by any stretch of the imagination. However, it is something that developers do have to keep an awareness of, you know, play with, right? Build that efficiency, and that will put them ahead of others who aren't, right? So being able to cut down on those repetitive tasks, just as 87% of those in the survey we're talking about, that's what this Copilot's for, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. And the last piece there is too is it's a great tool to help developers continue to learn.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Well, coming from the manager of learning and development over there, I expect nothing less to wrap up our first session here. Matt, looking forward to doing many, many more of these with you, and I appreciate your time this morning.
Thanks for having me, Rich. It's always a pleasure.
Thanks. And for Microbytes, this is Rich Bowers. Take care, everybody.